Before we left London, we got to sit down with Sir Tony Blair. He's recently been knighted. He served as Britain's Prime Minister for 10 years, starting in 1997. And he said not only was the Queen wise and perceptive, but she always had her finger on the pulse of her people. And we started the conversation when I asked Sir Tony about their final recent meeting. You just saw Her Majesty the Queen a few months ago at lunch. How did you find her?
Well, the extraordinary thing, which is why I was surprised when she passed away. I mean, she was on great form. You know, she had a problem with her leg, so physically. She was obviously frail, and you know, she's 96. But in terms of how she was in amazing form. She was warm and humorous, and she kept a very, very keen and sharp eye on the country and how it was changing and what its people thought right up until the end.
For 10 years, former Prime Minister Tony Blair had the rarest of access, one-on-one, weekly audiences with the Queen, meeting her alone hundreds of times. What did you learn about her from that very rare vantage point?
People often ask me about the politics, you know, what were her politics? And I say to people, I really don't know. And then they will often take me aside privately afterwards and say, no, but really, what were her politics? She was above it, above politics. When I was appointed Prime Minister, I remember she said to me, her first words to me, my first Prime Minister was Winston, and that was before you were born. So, you know, she had this extraordinary grip on history.
Did that put you in your place as a young, brash Prime Minister?
Because it was so strange for me, because as a little child, and I remember standing in the street and waving my little flag as she drove by. So it was for someone of my generation, she was all we'd known, and we'd grown up with her, and therefore when you're suddenly her Prime Minister, yes, it's a pretty humbling moment.
What, if anything, surprised you about her once you got to really know her?
She was extraordinarily gracious in private, and always, you know, exuded this sympathy, this understanding that, you know, whatever face you were putting on underneath, there was a lot of turmoil and anguish, as there are involved in these positions.
The Queen herself faced such turmoil 25 years ago in the days after Princess Diana's death. Then a new Prime Minister, Blair, is said to have helped persuade the Queen to more fully embrace the public outpouring, events even dramatized in a Hollywood movie.
So, what would you suggest, Prime Minister? Some kind of a statement?
She was an exceptional and gifted human being.
Was it difficult to be in that tricky position with the Queen when you had just come in?
It was difficult, but here's the thing. I mean, for her, she was trying to balance what she had to do as a queen and what she had to do as a grandmother. And she was acutely aware that she had two young children who had lost their mother in terrible circumstances and who were grieving and who needed to be looked after. In the end, she understood, because always her duty came first, that she had to respond to this extraordinary outpouring of grief about Princess Diana, but grief, and unlike her own passing now, mixed with, maybe anger's too strong a word, but a sense that something had happened that shouldn't have happened, and that Diana had been taken from people who really did love her. She really didn't need me to tell her. She sensed it, and then she responded. And when she responded perfectly. She got the tone absolutely right. You spent many, many visits in her beloved Balmoral, and people say that is where she was closest to being the regular person she perhaps one day wished or thought she could be. It's the tradition that every year the Prime Minister goes and spends a weekend in September at Balmoral with the Queen and with the family. And my first September was then just shortly after Princess Diana had died. And the tradition is when you go out into the grounds and you have a barbecue, that the royal family do everything, right? They lay the table, they serve the food, they do the washing up afterwards. I mean, I was, still obviously a very new Prime Minister, very nervous at being there. And it was a completely surreal event where, the Queen was serving me the food, and I wasn't allowed to even go and get the plate. I remember going back and sitting in the room in Balmoral afterwards. That was, I can't believe what just happened.
It must have been surreal.
That was when I realized it was an extraordinary thing to be a prime minister.
You were there Saturday in the front row among 6 other former prime ministers. What was it like to see King Charles III formally ascend to the throne?
All of us have grown up only knowing the Queen. So a change of monarch is a huge thing for the country. It sort of gives you a sense of our, for us at least, our history, the long nature of our country's identity and traditions.
Let's talk about King Charles. What kind of monarch do you think he will be?
I think he'll be a great monarch. I think that he's a very caring person. He was way ahead of his time. He was talking about climate change when most people didn't even know what the word meant. So I think he's got all of that experience, and he's watched his mother, and he knows now he's in a different position.
In our country, we have a phrase where presidents say the State of the Union is strong. The state of the monarchy under King Charles, what would you say?
Oh, it's definitely strong. There's always a debate all the time that runs throughout any modern country with a monarchy, because in one sense it's a complete anomaly in a world that's not very deferential, that dislikes hierarchy, that distrusts class, that often frowns upon tradition. But on the other hand, I think, and this was the Queen's genius in a way, was to combine that tradition with being comfortable with the modern world. This is part of our tradition. We enjoy the tradition. You know, we know what it does in terms of unifying our country, and you know, no, I think the monarchy is strong, and I think he will keep it strong.
Wow.
That was revealing.
He was prime minister 10 years, so you got to figure about roughly 500 or so one-on-one meetings with Queen Elizabeth.
You felt like you learned everything about the Queen, and then you hear that she actually served Tony Blair his meal and wouldn't let him touch a plate.
I love hearing these stories about Balmoral, because apparently it was Prince Philip on the barbecue, and if you were the guest, like, you didn't get up. They were the hosts. They did everything. He said even the Queen Mother, that was Queen Elizabeth's mom, she was help serving as well.
That was really insightful.
She's supposed to be very, very sharp. Former Prime Minister Gordon Brown said there was a time he went in there and some cabinet minister, somebody had resigned. He didn't know yet, but the Queen did. And he was totally mortified that she was more up on the news than he was. So it's interesting to hear that.
And it was also interesting to hear that she was above politics.
Yeah. We didn't know.